The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism, the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, and the Rabbinical Assembly. Today is the first day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 4th of Nisan, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Sunday, March 22nd, 2026, and we will read Parashat Tzav this coming Shabbat, and we are 10 days from Pesach. Let's begin. We'll start with our new Parsha, Parashat Tzav. Tzav is the second Parsha of the book of Deuteronomy. It begins with these lines, Vayidber Adonai el Moshe lemor, God should speak to Moses saying, Tzav et Aaron v'banav lemor, command Aaron and his children saying, Zot Torah to'olah, hiya olah al mokdal mizbeach. So this is the instruction of the olah sacrifice, or the elevation offering, and that it is an elevation offering. It's a sacrifice that should be lit on the mizbeach, on the altar, kol halayla ad haboker ve'esha mizbeach tukadbo, and that this should be a light. It should be on fire all night long until the morning, and the fire on the altar should continue all night, which is, I think, very, very interesting here. What is this sacrifice referring to? Well, it's actually specifically referring simply to the burnt offering that was offered in the afternoon. It was the afternoon communal sacrifice, but it was also left on all night long. So most sacrifices were burnt, and then the parts that were taken for eating were taken off, and the Kohanim would have a meal. But unlike this, it was actually left on the altar to burn all night long, and the Kohanim didn't get anywhere near the same amount of pieces or the amount of the sacrifice that they did in other parts. They still did get the skin, at least according to the hide, at least according to Nachmanides, but regardless, they didn't get as much as before. And it's for this reason, at least according to many opinions, that the most famous halachic midrash on this parsha is the idea that the unique word that is used in this word is tzav, command. And that's actually in the command form. Tzav, command this person, just do it. It's a very simple form. It's a very direct form. It's a very strong word. Tzav et Aaron. We usually don't have that. We just say speak to Aaron, saying, or there's a mitzvah to do this, but not command Aaron saying doing this. So why is this the case? Well, one of the reasons that the midrash gives is that this word tzav is used specifically in cases when there is loss of money at hand. Right? So there's loss of something at hand. So what's the loss of something at hand? Well, in most sacrifices, you're going to be very quick to do the sacrifice because you want to have the meat afterwards. You want to get your priestly part about it. But in this particular sacrifice, the Kohanim don't get as much. They just kind of leave it on the altar all night burning. So you might expect that the Kohanim might not be as diligent about the sacrifice because, again, they don't get the meat from it. So they might not be rushing in about it, which is why, according to some authorities, according to the halachic midrash, that uses the word tzav here, to move quickly. Because the Torah wants to remind us, especially at times when we don't have money to gain or we have money to lose, to move very, very quickly in order to, because you don't have the normal impetus of, well, I'm doing this because I want to make the money off of it, or I want to get this thing selfishly for myself. And so, therefore, the Torah has to push us even harder and more urgently so that we don't get lazy and not do this. Now, I think this says a lot about human nature. One thing I love about Judaism is it's so honest about human nature, that humans do tend to be selfish. Even the good ones, even the leaders tend to be selfish. We tend to think of ourselves. We don't react as fast when it's not for our own personal good. And so the Torah doesn't then desist from those demands and say, well, we can't demand things that don't have your personal good. But when we demand things that aren't for your personal good immediately, like having delicious meat or something like that, okay, then we're going to push even harder to move because we understand that humans can be lazy about this or push this aside in some cases. And so I love that the Torah meets us where we're at, not to say you don't have this obligation or this is going to be just too hard for you knowing how selfish you are, but we know you're selfish. So we're going to push this and make it more serious and give it enough teeth so that you'll actually do it. And this is important when we rise to the challenges of Torah. There are many times in Torah life where the challenge that's put in front of us or what's asked of us to do is hard and sometimes not rewarding immediately. And it's those particular mitzvot that we should push ourselves in even more to make sure we do correctly to prove our loyalty to Hashem and to prove our commitment to the relationship we have with God, right? That's so important. Oftentimes, when we're in a relationship, it's easy to do something good for somebody else when it's also good for us, right? When it also has a secondary reason, right, to make us feel good. But it's a whole different story when it's completely unselfish, when it's really just for the other partner. It's just something that their partner wants, and it doesn't even quite make sense to us. All the more so, right, we should push ourselves to do it because that actually depthens the relationship much more than the other previous commandment that's also selfishly good for us. Let's now turn to the Mishnah Torah on the laws of Pesach, laws of Chametz uMatzah. We're on the 4th chapter. We're going to go through the 8th through the 10th halachot today. 3 halachot, 1 session. Wow, in 5 minutes we can do it. Okay, so let's try to understand what these mean. Today we're going to talk about mixtures of chametz. Okay, things that are not fully chametz, meaning they're not just 100% leavened grain, but they're mixtures. And most of the things I think we eat today, or a lot of the chametz that we actually eat, are really mixtures of chametz, not just full chametz, unless you're having bread or something like that. So what are we talking about here? Well, there are many substances, obviously, that are mixtures of chametz, right? There's a little bit of chametz in it, but it's not fully chametz. And we know that this is also forbidden as well, according to our tradition, that we don't eat these as well. And so that's why we're so careful on Pesach to make sure that there's nothing hidden from our chametz inside. But I think where we often get very confused is, what about substances that we don't necessarily eat but might have chametz in it? For example, cleaning products or industrial products of some kind, or craft products, many different things. You'll be surprised about how many things have chametz in it. And they really do. There's a lot of things with chametz in it. Now, there's a really important rule. If we don't actually eat it, if we're not eating it, or there's no plan to eat it, or it's not something that's edible, then in that case, we don't. We are allowed to have chametz in the house. Okay. Now, this is specifically for things that are not edible. For example, like aluminum foil or a dishwashing product or something like that, or soap or something like that. All those things are considered acceptable to actually have chametz in it. The only thing that you have to watch for chametz in it is really food, which is so important. People can go so crazy, and they start looking for chametz in all kinds of things, and they all of a sudden get confused and scared. Oh my God, there's chametz in my paint that I'm using on the wall. Do I have to get rid of the paint on my wall? No, that's not. You don't. Only for things that you eat, which is, I think, just such an important rule at this point. Again, a main concern of my mind is making sure you don't go crazy on Pesach, right? And that's a good way to go crazy, and I think a good rule that helps us understand. Now, there's also the rule that even if chametz was at one time edible, if it was left in a place that makes it unedible, for example, Maimonides gives the example of a tanner's trowel, right? If one leaves it in there a certain amount of time until basically the chametz gets destroyed, or it decays or something like that, or it gets rotten or spoiled, in that case, that chametz now is considered acceptable, right? We're not penalized for that chametz anymore because it's destroyed, or its taste is so thoroughly messed up, it's not really recognizable as chametz anymore, or it's not considered what we would think as edible, right? Because if the chametz needs to be edible, even if it once was edible and now it becomes dirty, it becomes something that is unedible for whatever reason, whether rotten or spoiled, even in that case, then we actually are allowed to have that chametz in place, and very important. So if you find chametz on Passover that is spoiled or rotten or soaked in soap and disgustingness, for the most case, we don't really have to worry about destroying it because it's completely destroyed at this point in that way. That's actually one of the ways of destroying chametz is messing it up like that. So very important, and again, something that could save you a lot of headache on Passover. Let's now turn to the Menorat HaMaor. We're going to continue learning the section on Pesach. We're in the second chapter here and still learning about the oppression of the Jewish people in Egypt, which is so important to understand and picture deeply so we can really get involved in the suffering of the Jewish people, really feel it, to really empathize it so that we can be prepared for Pesach and the Seder, that's such an important part to understand the slavery and the oppression deeply. Well, one thing we're told in the story is Vayiven Ari Miskanot LaFaro. We're told that the Jewish people built storehouse cities, usually I think it's translated as, for Paro. And this is always a really weird translation, because I think when I think of storehouse cities, I think back to Joseph, right? Remember, Joseph was the sort of prime minister in Egypt before, and he built all these, I would guess, store buildings to have warehouses to store all this extra grain and extra food for the time of the famine. So maybe it's the fact that they're translating it this way because they're bringing that back up again. And the problem is these storehouses would have already been built. Why would the Egyptians then command them to build more storehouses on top of that if they've already been built for the famine? And it's for this reason, I think, that Rav and Shmuel sort of go in a different direction. Rav and Shmuel are two famous Amoraim who tend to argue a lot, why they're called Bar Plugta. And here they're arguing again. They're arguing specifically on what this word miskanot means here. One says miskanot means that it endangers. Misukan in Hebrew means dangerous, right? That something is actually dangerous, and the buildings actually endanger those who build it. And so we should know that according to this interpretation, that the very fact of just building these buildings was extremely dangerous, and therefore that the buildings were defined actually by how dangerous they were to put up. So the cause of building the buildings was not to fulfill some cause for the Egyptian or to fulfill something they needed, but rather to harm the Jewish people physically. That building these towers, building these whatever these are, and whatever they look like, were dangerous for the Jewish people. According to the other Amora, whether it's Rav or Shmuel, we don't know, said the word is not misukan or misachnot, but rather mimasknot, which means actually to impoverish. It doesn't mean necessarily to physically endanger, but it means to make poor. And this comes from the idea, and I love this expression, the Amar Mar for the master said, Kol ha'osek bebinyan mitmasken, right? Everybody who is busy or toils with building, will become impoverished, will become poor. And anybody who knows who builds today, builds houses, condominiums, whatever, to build anything, it's so ridiculously expensive. And it just brings me back to remembering that movie, The Money Pit, where you just keep throwing things into this house and it keeps eating up all your money. But it really takes it to one level higher, because if we interpret it the same way as we did with the danger understanding of this, the building itself is defined. There are a mimasknot, right? There are cities that their purpose is to impoverish the Jewish people in doing them. And they are impoverishing in doing them. So I think the most important point to get out of this, whether it's impoverishing the Jewish people or physically hurting the Jewish people, what we should know is that was the actual reason for the building of these buildings in the first place. They weren't, sort of built for another good reason, and it was a secondary thing that it was really hard to build, so the Jews got hurt doing it. But rather, the whole entire point of building these structures was to abuse the Jewish people, whether physically or financially in this regard. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions, and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.